Hey there, guys and gals. Welcome back to Back Pocket Game Reviews. I'm about to head into work for the day. Hope you're all having a wonderful Sunday. Yeah, maybe? Not so much? Don't know how it is where you are, but we've got some pretty strong winds here today. But today's video, we're going to kind of talk about how it's kind of an interesting time in the console market, and it's one of those things that I never really thought that I would see or be able to say as easily as what I can right now. So for those of you who didn't watch the Game Awards this year, they actually had the different heads of the systems on stage. You had Reggie from Nintendo, you had Phil Spencer from Xbox, and God, for some reason I can never remember the guy for Sony's name, but all on stage at one time, and they were all talking about how coming together and all of that kind of stuff. And over the years, it's not been unusual for Phil Spencer to acknowledge Sony doing something good or Nintendo doing something good. He actually addresses that quite often, and Microsoft has taken a very headfront approach to let's tear down this whole wall. There is no real console war, which there isn't. If we're talking in aspects of what it was in the 90s, no, these consoles aren't really duking it out against each other. They're not fighting against each other. They're not trying to demolish what the other has built or anything along those lines. But Sony has never really given much acknowledgement to Xbox ever. And recently, one of the Sony executives actually stated publicly in an interview that Xbox is really paving the way in services. So it was really kind of one of those points where Sony's kind of been the stubborn one this whole generation. You've even had Nintendo, who's kind of come out of their shell. They've released all of the stipulations on what you can stream. Their content creation's all gotten much easier. Nintendo is starting to even become more open and was one of the first to allow crossplay, and now you have Sony finally dipping their toes into it. But it's really interesting because every time I read any kind of article written by any kind of gaming journalist, you always hear, oh, they just want to sell their hardware. They're trying to sell their hardware. They want that hardware sale. But for some reason, we don't always take into account or acknowledge that most gaming hardware at release is sold at a loss. You're not really making anything off the hardware. You're making stuff off of the games that come over to your platforms. So that's what you're really looking at, is being able to put those games onto your platforms and getting money off of getting them there. So obviously that's a huge plus. And Xbox Live and PSN and all these other things are where a lot of this money is made. So obviously you do want people in your ecosystem, but the true moneymaker for most of these companies is selling the games themselves. And that's kind of why you're seeing Xbox starting to become, well, let's sell it on PC. Our game is going to do great if it's only an Xbox exclusive, but if we also put it on PC, that's a whole bunch of extra. But then you can also look at services like Game Pass, where Game Pass is really kind of leading the way in that whole Netflix of gaming kind of category. And I mean, when we're talking about price and what's coming with it for the price, it's really setting the tone for what that kind of service is and could potentially become over time. And I get it. Some of us have our preferences. Obviously, we've known that I've been a big Xbox guy, even though I'm constantly wearing PlayStation shirts and on the PlayStation majority of the time. And a lot of that is because of Xbox Live as a whole. But you should want the other console to be competitive. You should want that kind of competition. You should want that kind of innovation, because what that brings to the table then is now Sony is going to have to innovate and be able to try to match those services and be able to bring out their own kind of offerings in an attempt to not really lose headway. But we're not really at a point of where they slander each other left and right, outside of when Xbox sometimes randomly likes to contradict Sony when they say stuff like, oh, backwards compatibility is something everyone asks for but no one uses, and then Xbox is like, well, here's all of our metrics from that. So you do get some really interesting stuff in terms of what is said between them and how they interact publicly, but it is very different than like the 90s. Some of you who weren't alive don't really remember the big Sega versus Nintendo console war. It was pretty epic. every one of Sega's ads pretty much ended with Sega does what Nintendo don't. I mean, it was just blatant stabs at Nintendo. Obviously, you can see which one of them is still standing. And Nintendo really never full-on acknowledged Sega. They would refer to them as the competition or the other systems. It was never like let's just take a direct stab at Sega. Nintendo's classy like that, I guess. But it's just really interesting to see how this is all kind of coming together. And really, the Game Awards moment where they were all three on stage at the same time, being very nice and talking about how they want to move everything forward in the gaming industry. Honestly, the only way stuff is going to move forward in the gaming industry is for them to be able to understand that they need each other. And it might not necessarily... If Sony was the only one on the market, how much stuff do you think would be innovated? Sony's doing an amazing job with first-party exclusive. They've got amazing first-party single-player games. Do you think Sony would ever even think about having to add name changes to PSN? Granted, that needs a lot of work. Don't change your name on PSN. It's not worth it. But do you think a lot of these things would be stuff and avenues that they're starting to explore if Xbox didn't already start to explore these or already implement these features? And that's how competition works. Competition is one of the biggest things that helps the consumer. There are more options than just one. You are going to have more options. So if a company does do something that's anti-consumer or a bad practice for the consumer can easily make a decision to change their pocketbook. Or if the company is seeing that, hey, we're losing some headway because of this feature, we need to bring out a similar feature or a competitive feature, all of a sudden, you're now going to have more available to you. Like right now, Sony is thinking about, obviously, we've seen the patents that have gone around for backwards compatibility on the PlayStation 5. Do you think that has anything to do with the fact that Microsoft did it at all? And I'm not trying to say this as a fanboy or someone who's trying to change your mind for who you should be going over to. No, you should game on what you're happy gaming on. But the point of the statement that I am making is you should also be able to appreciate what the other companies are doing to help progress the situation you're in as well. That is how competition works. And again, competition's a necessity, especially in a constantly evolving tech industry. It's one of those things that keeps us on the cutting edge, but also keeps it to a point of where it benefits the consumer. This is one of those things that's been weighing on me for a little while, because it was like a week ago that the head of one of the executives at Sony was like, oh, Xbox is really paving the way on services. And he mentioned Game Pass and how stable Xbox Live is. And those are really two of Xbox's things that they hang their hat on. And it's one of those things that a lot of people don't always take into consideration. But as gamers, we should be uniting as a front and fight the real bad guys like EA Games. God, I hate EA. Oh, we're going to be talking about EA here in the next day or two. So, but it's just really interesting to see. And it's really cool to be able to be in a time where the consoles aren't warring with each other. Don't get me wrong. It was always fun to watch Sega take that stab at Nintendo. And I was a Sega kid in the 90s. Sega's commercials literally embodied the 90s. Like, they were edgy and screaming, and it was the 90s. I apologize if you can hear the wind sounds. It's bad enough it's shaking my car. But guys, I'd like to hear what you guys think about the competition and just the way that the console manufacturers and crossplay and all of this stuff is starting to shape up. And hell, you're even about to have Xbox Live on the Switch. That's pretty much like, we know it's coming now. We just don't know to what capacity. There's even rumors going around about Game Pass being on the Switch. And the reason why I'm not talking about that is because I already stated that I thought that might happen. And I'm not going to reconfirm a rumor when it was something I already kind of figured. You know what I'm saying? Let me know down in the comments down below what you guys think. Also, if you'd like to follow me anywhere else or even go over to my Patreon, now that we're in the middle of Adpocalypse 3.0. I can't talk. But if you'd like to follow me anywhere else, Twitter, Patreon, Teespring, anywhere I'm at, you can be down below. Also, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to drop a thumbs up. Also, if you're new to the channel, don't forget to click subscribe and ding that little bell. I know I ask you for a lot at the end of my videos. I'm sorry. Guys, I love you all. Enjoy your Sunday. Have a great day, and I'll see you all soon.